Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another episode review from the classic original Are You Afraid of the Dark TV show. This episode comes from season 1. It was the 4th episode overall, but it was technically the pilot that aired before the whole show actually came about. It's kind of weird. The story was written by Chloe Brown, and the episode was directed by DJ McHale. And the episode in question is called The Tale of the Twisted Claw. Now, I never really watched this episode as a kid because Are You Afraid of the Dark, by the point that I would have been watching it, was mainly on reruns. And I've already mentioned this in the past. The main ones I had access to were like Tale of the Hungry Hounds and The Lonely Ghost on my old Snick tapes as a kid. So I caught the 6th and the 7th seasons as they aired from memory, and a couple of reruns over the years, like I said. But I never really watched this one until a few years ago when I was casually looking through YouTube one day and found a playlist of Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes, and somebody had uploaded it. And I looked into it, and it said that this was the pilot, and I think the pilot version is the one that I watched here on my bootleg. It was not that great. There's a lot of growing pains, I feel, with especially season 1, Are You Afraid of the Dark, that I can't be too mean about unless it's really bad, like Hungry Hounds. This one, it's not good, and it's also not bad. So it's not going to get a recommendation from me. But unless you have like a childhood nostalgia for this show or some morbid curiosity to see where the roots began for this, I would actually say start here with this episode because it technically was the pilot, and this episode did mark the beginning of the Golden Age in October of 1991. Whether people want to admit that or not, this is pretty much the birthplace of the Golden Age and the founding block of Are You Afraid of the Dark. And it's a bit of niche history behind it too. But yeah, if you want to start here for that reason, perfectly fine. Other than that, you can kind of miss this one and catch it later at your own pleasure. All right, so let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So this story is very unconventional from the rest of the Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes that I've come to find, because it starts off with a cold open that means absolutely nothing to the rest of the story. It's some kid laying in a bed, and he wakes up to his alarm clock and sees some type of demon ghost chilling by his bed. And the Midnight Society's already chilling by the campfire in the woods. And they don't really greet each other by name or anything, but they're just, hanging around, and it's someone's turn to tell a story. And it ends up being The Tale of the Twisted Claw, pretty much in the more traditional fashion that you expect out of this show, except, like I said, this one has a cold open to it that feels kind of out of place to the rest of the series, but still rudimentarily the same thing, right? So the story starts off with these two kids named Kevin and Dougie. And they are, I guess, getting in the Halloween spirit the day before Halloween, or maybe right before they're about to go out trick-or-treating. And they come across this kind of spooky looking house with a big iron gate in the front yard. And it belongs to this woman who I guess is like the neighborhood hermit, and all the kids are afraid of her. And they think, it'll be a good testament to go see if they can, get a prank on her. So they go up to her door, ring the doorbell or knock, and she opens the door, and they squirt shaving cream in the woman's face, and they run away laughing. And the woman's just sitting there, scrubbing the shaving cream off, laughing, and looking like she has something in store for them later on. So the next part of the story, Dougie's in his house getting ready to go trick-or-treating. He has like this white robe on with this really goofy looking mask. And his mom tells him that his friend Kevin's at the door, and Kevin's dressed like a bum. And apparently this kid dresses like a bum for every Halloween. Yeah. And the two of them decide to go out trick-or-treating and get some candy and continue the Halloween tradition. Well, they're out trick-or-treating, and they come across the lady's yard again. And they're like, after we pranked her, do you think it's a good idea to go back and ask for candy, and they're like, yeah, they convince each other that, why not? They have nothing else to lose. So they go up to the door, and the lady's kind of taken back by having trick-or-treaters. She thought no kid was going to come that night, so she invites them in, and the kids are just waiting there in the foyer of the entranceway, and she brings out a box, and this inside this box has this little paw inside, like a little vulture's claw or a monkey's hand or something. So this is like a monkey's paw type of story. And she's going over this legend about the paw and says that it can grant you wishes, and she wants the kids to have it. And the kids are like, at first, I don't know if we really want this. And then they're like, we'll take it just to get out of here. And when the boys leave, the woman looks maniacal and just laughing that she's probably just screwed these boys over. And when they leave, they end up, wandering around again, to go tour some houses. And they come across a cavalcade of bullies led by this one guy that plays a role the next day. But they're getting like bullied by these teenagers wearing like Phantom of the Opera masks, and they run away, and they get home, and the next day they're at school, and they're talking about it, and they're looking over at this kid, and I don't know, I can't remember the exact details, but I think the kid is related to one of the kids that were bullying them the night before on Halloween, and the kid is also going to be in the way of Kevin, who wants to race for a gold medal for his gym class. This kid is pretty good and could beat Kevin. So Kevin makes a wish that essentially means something bad's going to happen to this other kid. So while they're at gym class, recess, whatever, and they're doing the race, something happens to the kid, hurts his knee really bad, and they have to call an ambulance because for some reason there's no school nurse. And the kids realize that the claw thing must have worked. So the two of them start to kind of like bicker about what to do. They're at, I think, Dougie's house or maybe Kevin's house. And while they're playing a tug of war, Dougie accidentally makes a wish holding the claw that, might do something to one of the set of parents of the kids. And this freaks them out because once this happens, they they look out the window and they see like a ghostly black car driving, and they think that it has something to do with the wish they made. And they're freaking out, and they're like trying to figure out what to do for the last wish, because apparently whatever the second wish was, it's coming for them, and they are trying to figure out how to solve this problem and make it right. So they get this bright idea to come up with a wish that essentially makes it to where they never pulled the prank on the woman that gave them the claw, and everything would be fine again, and nothing that they've experienced would have happened to them. And after that, everything seems to be fine. Dougie's parents comes back through the door. Everything seems to be back to normal, with a little mild innocent twist, and I'm not going to spoil it. Little happy-go-lucky ending too, on top of it. Kind of cliche and corny, but that's essentially what you're going to expect out of the Tale of the Twisted Claw. I'm going to keep it very vague because this one's very easy to spoil. Not a lot happens in it. So yeah, there's that. So, I guess let's start off with some positives to this episode here. For starters, I do dig that this story takes place on Halloween. Halloween to me is like the pinnacle time of year as a kid to experience. And the fact that the episode tried to offer that, in Are You Afraid of the Dark, you don't really have many Halloween-centered episodes. I think there's maybe like 2 to 3 tops. And this is one of them. They're not as great as Goosebumps, I will say, but I do think that the atmosphere here and there does kind of work, even though the setting choices they picked don't look anywhere as atmospheric as something like The Haunted Mask or Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns or any of the Halloween Goosebumps episodes. But I dig the time period it's set in. Initially. I think the concept of the story is tried and true. This is a monkey's paw ripoff type of tale. And it's kind of hard to mess something like this up. I do think that it brings the characters more closer to reality. They start off kind of like crappy kids and they're not really likable. But as the story goes on, they get some punishment and they realize, you know, they have to fix what they've caused. And at the end, you kind of get this sense that maybe they've mildly come full circle, which I can accept. There's not a lot here to praise about this episode, but there is more effort here in the story than some of the weaker Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. So I can really hang my hat there for it. And I do like the acting performance of the neighbor lady here. I think she was very campy, but in a fun way. Going into some dark episodes, sometimes you have to go in with that camp lens or it's just not going to land. She did a fantastic job being over the top, messing with these kids. It's almost like, it reminds me of this story I read from Spine Tinglers called Your Turn to Scream, which I think was a terrible book. But the one thing I liked about it was the lady neighbor trying to get back at the kids for messing around with her. And yeah, that stuff works. I think, she serves as a good character to throw a bad omen to these bad kids. And I think that it does help remedy how unlikable these two kids are at first. So yeah, she's a good touch for the episode, I would say. And that's about it for positives. Negatives, they add up here pretty badly. Like I said, I do like the time period is set on Halloween, but the story is not focused on that all the way. Like it starts off like Halloween, and then it goes into the day after where they have the paw now, and it's supposed to be, I guess, in November, and the kids are running around in shorts outside. It's probably freezing out there. Like, yeah, okay. And you go to this whole forced bit, near the end where, the third wish, of course, comes out of left field for these kids that say, oh, we've made two really impetuous decisions with these wishes. Now we got to make the ultimate right one. It just feels kind of convenient there near the end too. But for a Halloween-centered episode, there's really not much atmosphere to it. There's nothing about it that sticks out to be Halloween, right? And I guess I've already touched on my second negative bleeding into this. It feels kind of all over the place, especially when it's trying to set up location changes in the episode, which is welcomed by me. You have Halloween, you have school, you have the home of Dougie, you got the neighbor lady's house. There's a lot of different set pieces going on in this episode, and I like that. I guess that's another positive. But every single scene, every single scene change is either rushed through, like the Halloween stuff it hits the ground running with that, and you feel like you don't get much. And also, the whole thing about the kids leaving the neighbor's house and then ended up with these bullies in like a random basketball field area, completely random. It's just there to, I guess, be spooky and creepy to kids, but it makes no sense why that's in the story. Same thing about the logic of kids running around outside without like jogging equipment on, like, sweatpants, sweatshirts when it's supposed to be November and cold. I don't know. They're running around in shorts. Makes no sense. The acting, too, throughout both of these parts is terrible, right? Minus the old lady. I guess we're kind of leading into a third negative. The acting is terrible, right? I have no words for how bad Kevin and Dougie are in the episode. They're just very stiff. There's nothing about them that's gripping. It's not even entertaining for them. I can definitely see the idea that some people think that this episode is so bad that it's good, because when these kids are thrown into situations where you think they would have some sort of facial expression of what's happening, they're just stiff and they're just like looking blankly into the air. Or when they react, they're not reacting with any emotion. There's like no fear in their voice. There's no urgency. There's no, whimsicalness. It's just complete flat acting the entire episode. Minus, I guess, the fight scene between them trying to fight over the paw near the climax of the story. And I should say climax loosely here. But yeah, very weak acting from the two main stars here. And the story, man. While the story is tried and true, at least the concept, the execution here just falls flat. It falls so flat. It's not kind of, dilapidated and scatterbrained as badly as something like Hungry Hounds, but it just goes from point to point to point with seemingly no rhyme or reason. And you already seen this story before, so you know what to expect out of this, right? You just don't really feel like there's any real stakes to it all, minus maybe the first wish when the kid wishes that something would happen to this other boy, and the boy ends up injuring his knee. The second wish pretty much is all supposed to be cerebral horror. I think that was what DJ MacHale was going for these first batch of Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. He said that in the past. So I can kind of see the second wish and what he was trying to aim for, but nothing being seen on screen really sells me on any of the stakes of the second wish. And the third one, how they came to this point is so convenient in the plotting and so sudden that it's not even believable that they came to this conclusion. And then you get to, the climax and the ending portion, there's really no climax. It's just them randomly deciding to make this third wish, and everything goes back to normal seemingly. You get a mildly cliche ending, very expected for this type of story, and it's just kind of milquetoast in the bad way. Like, okay, you're hoping for more of a twist or some zest to spicing up the story with the ending, and you just don't get it. So yeah, all in all, the Tale of the Twisted Claw. It was very close to being a bad episode in my opinion. The only reason why I'm not going to give this below a 3 out of 5 stars, even though I really want to, is the fact that it does make more effort in its concept and story than some other episodes, especially from season 1. There are some with really terrible concepts. This one is not a terrible one. It's just been done so much beforehand that it just doesn't stick out, right? And I think Spongy444 on Discord kind of said it best when I told him I was watching this. He said something that I think is kind of true about this. It feels like it's a passable attempt at a pilot. They don't know where they're going to go with this show. They don't know how family friendly they want to be. They don't know how dark they can push it yet. So they settle with something basic and, more just traditionally spooky like this to be the pilot than something like, I don't know, Laughing in the Dark, right? They just didn't have that, right? But then part of me is also thinking, if it depends on when they film these episodes, because if they film this one first, that's understandable. But then you get, episodes like Laughing in the Dark with a more creepy monster, but you still have the cerebral horror. And it makes me think that they really didn't get into the real element of just visual horror until maybe like season 4 or 5, when they started going really dark with twists and stuff. More so. So yeah, it just has more common season 1 ailments, right? You still have the Midnight Society interrupting the story. And actually, in this specific case, I do enjoy it when they interrupt, because it kind of brings some levity to the story, makes it less, I don't know, boring, because this can be boring at times. And I do like seeing, like, early days Midnight Society here interacting with each other. And you can definitely tell that the cast is fairly new, getting to know each other. And I think it's kind of a special thing to witness in some weird metaphysical way. When watching this. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you've seen this episode, you know what I'm talking about. You just see their interactions, and you just think, wow, they get so much better as time goes along. So, with that being said, with all the issues combined with this episode, I decided to deduct 2 points off the top and give this a flat 3 out of 5 stars. This is a not good, not bad episode. Pushing bad, but it's just kind of straight up meh. Very mid, as the kids would call it these days. There's nothing remarkable about it. There's nothing painfully awful about it. It just exists, right? And that's kind of a shame for it being the first Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, technically, because it's the pilot that aired before Fandom Cab in 1992, almost by a full year. So, kind of a whimper. Very forgettable. You know, in this show's run, there's 91 episodes. There are a handful of really bad ones, but this one is just, I think it's in a worse spot than the bad ones, because at least the bad ones are memorable for being bad. This one is just not memorable at all, and I can definitely see myself forgetting the concept of this after I've seen this episode collectively now 3 or 4 times in my life. I always forget what goes on in this episode, and every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, it's a monkey's paw story. I'll forget about this in like 2 months, trust me. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Tale of the Twisted Claw. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.